All right, so part 2 of the video series here is the actual challenge nuts and bolts itself. One of these days I'm going to get better at taking these videos. I told you I didn't promise anything wonderful here. But when we look at the challenge itself, there are certain daily habits that we want to follow. We want to follow, one page too far here, we want to follow a basic of 4 things we're going to add to every single day, and then we're going to subtract 4 things every single day. If you only do these +4, -4 things, I guarantee you're going to see some level of result with this program as well too. So the reason we add 4 things every single day, it's like addition or subtraction by addition. I know, public school math here, right? But if we go and we make sure we drink half our body weight in ounces of water, we have vegetables with every meal and have a greens drink first thing in the morning. If we work out every day or make sure we're getting 10,000 steps in, and then if we start that 3rd pillar of wellness, our thinking pillar, and we make sure that we're doing a gratitude journal every single day, I promise if you commit to doing this for over the next 6 weeks, you're going to see a real change in your life. Your energy is going to improve. Your alertness, your capacity to do really good workouts is going to change. And then on top of it too, you'll notice as if it's like your brain starts getting trained to, like, when you're in the woods at night, right, and it gets really dark out, we can shine the flashlight. Your brain's going to get trained to, like, look at what the flashlight is shining on rather than the dark and scary shadows behind all of that stuff. And that's what we want to start to condition ourselves for, is like we want to take action and add those things in. Addition is much easier than subtraction because it gives us a framework to stand on. But at the end of the day, this is a challenge. It's meant to be difficult. And so we're going to subtract some stuff too. Deep fried food, we're going to subtract added sugars. I will qualify that and say you can have up to 10 to 15 grams a day. We'll cap it at 15 here. But realistically, I'd love to see you cut out all added sugars throughout this. We're going to cancel out our sodas and alcohols. Oh my gosh, no, how could you? It's 6 weeks. Hang in there with me. And then finally, we're going to get rid of those processed carbs, white flours, or what I call like the white poisons that are in our diet, the heavily processed stuff. And for those of you guys, again, they're going to be wearing that constant glucose monitor, you're going to notice how rough this stuff can be on your bodies here too. So that's the stuff that we do every single day. From there, we want to sprinkle in a massive amount of accountability, because that's just the framework of the stuff that helps us be healthy, live long, and be athletic as adults, right? The accountability is the piece that holds us to the commitments that we're going to make. And with commitments, right, that's the reason we charge for challenges. It's because if we're going to make an investment, whether it's with our time or our money, we're making a commitment as well too, and we're that much more likely to follow through on it. So not only are we making that investment through time and finances, but we're going to make an investment or a commitment with our time, because you're going to be meeting with a coach every single week as well too, to see how things are going. In those discussions, that's where we're going to discuss your daily habit tracker and how things have been going. We're going to discuss, like, if you food journal at all. Again, that's an option inside of this. Constant glucose monitors, fasting, all those different things, and where you're having some trouble, because then we can apply strategies to the framework that we just discussed in order to help you be more successful with this as a whole. So you'll notice that in your manual's eating habit guides, right, that there's 3 different food guides to choose from. As you do your in-bodies, we're going to assign to you meal guide A, B, or C. Now we have these based on a calorie amount, our desired amount of protein we want to have you get in the day, as well as the right type of carbohydrates that are going to manage some of those blood sugar swings, as well as just like really be good for our overall digestive health, and then the right volumes of fat. Fat tends to be a category we tend to overeat on in Wisconsin. And so we want to make sure that we're managing that stuff. And that's why we assign you an eating habit guide. As you look throughout the day, the other reason that we're going to be eating in this format, or trying to get you to eat in this format, is that we're taking advantage of 2 different things. Number 1 is going to be the thermic effect of food. About 10% of the calories that we burn every single day are going to be burned in the digestion of the things that we put inside of our body. When we spread that out and like those meals more frequently through the day, it's basically that we're maximizing that thermic effect. Think back to like when you had a baby, and like whether you breastfeed or not, like they eat every 2.5 to 4 hours, like every 3 to 4 hours would be an easier way of putting it. Well, that's because that's like where their metabolism's at. They don't have a stomach that can put more in there, so they have to like keep consuming in order to like maintain that growth and progress and staying healthy. We didn't really change a whole lot, right? We didn't change species or anything like that in the time we grew from being 5 months old to being 50 years old. Our bodies are still going to be set up in a positive way that way. The second reason for this meal structure for you guys here is because we want to manage that variability in those blood sugar swings. Again, if you're doing the constant glucose monitor version of this, you're going to notice that like, wow, when I eat more than like 400 or 500 calories in a meal, I'm a little groggy about like 45 minutes to an hour afterwards. Well, and this is something that personally I found for myself too, and we'll discuss later on. I noticed the same thing, right? I overate a meal, no matter how perfectly it was, there's going to be a rise up, and then there's going to be a dip on the way down, because when our blood sugar comes up, right, we have insulin that releases and pulls that back down again. We want to manage that so that we can have our energy as smooth as possible throughout the entire day. So we basically take a framework of 3 meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then we stack in our carbohydrates, our fats, our fruits, our veggies inside of all this. We add in 2 snacks with this, and the other part too is you'll notice that this is going to be a very high volume of food. Not high calorie, but high volume of food compared to what you're used for. If you were going to sit down and eat that same 800 to 1,000 calorie meal that you may be used to eating otherwise, the room that it would take on your plate would probably be about like a half to 2/3 of like the meal size that these meals will be for you, with significantly less calories. So again, like with eating less calories but more voluminous food, you're just not going to be able to eat as much as well. And so because we want to eat enough calories, we have to spread this out throughout the day. And we can discuss more about the specifics of it and things that we can manage, but I'm going to leave that to the one-on-ones, because that's just a little bit more of an appropriate place for us to discuss that versus in like a setting and a presentation like this. Now, the first thing we open up in the day is a greens drink first thing in the morning. Now, my coach was the one that said, hey, Stephen, I want you to take a greens drink first thing in the morning. And I've been doing that now for almost 8 years. First thing that hits my stomach every single morning is a greens drink. Even if like it's just some magic potion that does nothing of what it claims, I know that I'm at least drinking 16 ounces of water immediately upon waking up. Now, it's not true that it's just a magic potion, and I could probably ask a dozen different ladies in here why they make sure that they order greens every single time we put in an order. There's a bunch of really awesome phytonutrients that we just aren't otherwise getting in our daily meals, right? If we have vegetables with every meal, it's pretty much the same 4 to 5 vegetables, because again, we're in Wisconsin. We have a limited supply of fresh fruits and veggies that we can gain access to. Second of all with it is that there's a lot of really awesome probiotics and prebiotics in a greens supplement, like a greens drink or greens powder. They're going to help our overall digestive health and make sure things keep moving, if you know what I mean. And then additionally with it too, it's going to help fill in some of those gaps of micronutrients. So we already talked about phytonutrients, but then there's those other micronutrients like your vitamin A, your minerals, your vitamin C, D, all the other letters of the alphabet, elemental P, right? Like we want to make sure that we're helping fill those gaps, because that's going to help our long-term metabolic health. So those are the reasons that we do the greens drink first thing in the morning. And then we start to talk about the vegetable piece of this. So with vegetables, everybody's got their favorites, and we just kind of talked about that a little bit. For the most part, anything that's going to be starchy, so potatoes, corn, I know I just like eliminated half of Wisconsin's vegetable intake right there. Those starchy vegetables we're going to consider a carbohydrate for the purposes of this challenge, even though, yes, technically it's a vegetable. From there, like what vegetables can you eat? Go for it. We're not going to be all carnivore diet here and say like, oh my God, you can't have root vegetables, you can't have this, you can't have that. I've never seen a vegetable try to come after me, and I understand the whole concept around that, like, hey, vegetables have certain chemicals that are just kind of like natural adaptations so that animals won't eat them, and that isn't good for our digestive health. And that's why when you eat a ton of vegetables, like you ever had this experience maybe with kale, like if you overeat kale, it's kind of more of an urgent rush to the bathroom, again, if you know what I mean. Well, you're right. We're not ruminant animals, right? We're not like cows with 4 stomachs that get to like sit there and digest that food. We're mammals, and well, so are cows. But like with us as humans, right, we have that one single stomach. And so most of those nutrients in our vegetables are not bioavailable to us because we're not ruminant animals. Therefore, what we need to do then is cook our food or cook our vegetables in order to reduce like the effect that that raw vegetable is going to have on us, right? It kind of unlocks and breaks down the cell wall so that we can gain access to the nutrients inside of it. So in an ideal, perfect world, you're going to steam your vegetables. You're going to maybe like bake your vegetables. Worst comes to worst, you can boil or eat them fresh. Like, again, not hung up on either of those situations, especially if it's the difference of you like getting hungry another hour and a half later and trying to eat like a Snickers bar or stop at a gas station in order to like fill the gap that is causing that hunger for you too. So again, like take your pick in it, but we want to make sure that we're preparing our vegetables with that, and then we're adding that to every meal in a reasonable portion size. Again, the portion of vegetables that I have is going to be different for you. It's different for my 5 and 3-year-old, right? Those things are going to change depending upon our size, our age, and everything else that goes alongside of it. Now, protein is going to be one of these ones where you guys are not used to consuming this much protein. We're going to discuss this one a little bit more thoroughly. So with our protein, this is where I'm going to really encourage that you buy yourself a food scale. Now, when we go to use our food scale with our protein, yes, we gave you a whole bunch of examples inside of your guidebooks. The thing I'm going to tell you is that the less legs, the better, right? Egg whites don't have any legs, so they are a leaner source of protein. We can talk about the yolk. Basically, the yolk is primarily fat, and so that's where a lot of the calories in an egg are coming from. That's why we encourage egg whites. Fish and seafood, again, once again, no legs. So some of the leanest sources of protein that we get. Then we get into our poultry and chicken. We can get into pork. And then honestly, even beef is totally fine too. We had not ground chuck last night, but we had a chuck roast last night. We trim the fat off. We cook it down. We trim the fat off. And then that's like where we're eating that food. So you can find lean sources. Your venison is awesome for this. But we need to know what we're having. So we are going to weigh your food before you cook it. Here's the thing I'm going to have you remember, right? If you go to McDonald's and you order a quarter pounder with cheese, like I promise that that quarter pounder is going to weigh less, that patty is going to weigh less than a quarter of a pound because that's the weight of that patty before they cook it. And so in our case as well too, we're going to have you weigh your food ahead of cooking it. How do we do that? Well, what I want you to do is you're going to take your scale, you turn it on, you turn it to make sure that it's in the correct amount or weight volume. We're looking for ounces in this case, ounces. You're going to take and you're going to put your little pan on that scale, and then we're going to zero that scale out. After we zero the scale out, we're going to take your meat, put it in the scale. I had the lid on before, so I'm going to put the lid back on as well too. And now I see, oh good, I've got 3 ounces of meat in there. For me, I'm going to add a little bit more, and so I would add more meat to that. I'm going to make a little bit of a mental note and record that at that point in time as well, too, to make sure that I got enough protein inside of that. If I remember correctly, roughly speaking, every ounce of lean meat is going to have about 6 grams of protein, if I remember correctly on that. So that's how we weigh and measure it. Now, I know that a lot of us in the dairy state, we love to get our protein from dairy sources. With the photo shoot, we put a little bit more of a harder constraint on dairy simply because like that's the photo shoot. But in this situation in living daily life, I'm not hung up on you having dairy as a source of protein during your snacks, right? Before lunch, before dinner. But for the most part, I want you to stick to making sure that there's no sugar added and that you're at least getting 10 grams of protein per 100 calories. Most Greek yogurts are going to fit this. I don't know if all cottage cheeses fit this as well too, but we don't want the dairy to be the main source of protein. There's like a lot of like gut inflammation stuff that can exist for some people with dairy, so that's one of the asterisks with it. The other one too is that it's just super calorie dense. Like I do want you to cut cheese out. I know. Cut cheese out for the next 6 weeks here. And the reason for cutting the cheese out, dad jokes. The reason for cutting the cheese out is going to, again, be because it's very, very calorie dense. Very nutrient dense too, but very calorie dense, and we overconsume that. The next time you get to, take your food scale and measure what a real serving size of shredded cheese is, and you're going to be like, oh, I've been putting like twice that amount on all of my tacos every single time I made them. So again, just kind of keep that sort of thing in mind on the protein piece of it. Then we dive into carbohydrates. What's really fun, again, is that like these constant glucose monitors are becoming available over the counter, and so we can kind of show you more and more stuff about our complex carbohydrates. So complex carbohydrates are carbohydrates that, when we look at a glycemic index, are going to raise your blood sugar numbers more slowly and not as high. And so that means that they're generally less processed. They're going to have a higher amount of fiber inside of it, and also like going to move through your body a little bit better too. For some folks, like my wife Corey, she's amazing at this, but she can have like whole wheat bread, noodles, pasta, whatever, right? Like and process it really well. Doesn't really work in my favor a ton. I got to stick to like more of the rices and the potatoes for my sources of carbs. Otherwise, I'll feel a little bit like more bloated and fluffy. But the perfect rule of thumb that I want you to look for here when you're purchasing your complex carbohydrates is 1 gram of fiber per 50 calories of 100% whole wheat. So you got to look at that ingredient list first, or look at the front side of it and make sure it says 100% whole wheat. And then when you look at your nutrition facts, you go down, you find your fiber. Let's say it says 3 grams of fiber. You multiply by 50, so 150. You look at the top of the nutrition label, and if it's at 150 calories or less per serving, you're good to go. Go ahead, you can have those carbohydrates. As for the serving size, when we flip back to what your meal guides are and how much of those carbohydrates you should be having, I want you to look at that label and go, 1 serving is the serving size that they're putting on that box. So in the event it's a slice of bread, some breads are going to be, 2 slices for 120 calories. Other slices are going to be maybe like 1 slice is 90 calories, right? So you got to make sure you're looking at the labels, because not all of these things are created equal when we look at what those nutrition labels say with it. Now, when we start looking at like corn, white rice, like white potatoes, if you absolutely must have those things. Like honestly, prior to filming this, today was sushi day, so like got my nice like lean sushi, hit all the numbers that I wanted, and I had white rice with it. I know I've got an awesome lift coming in this afternoon here once I'm all done with this, so I'm going to be able to use that energy towards that, right? So I'm using it to fuel the lift that I have here in a little bit. If you must have those things, try to stage it about an hour or so before your workout so that you can use that energy towards something. Otherwise, and again, I can show you the data on it because I already checked on my constant glucose monitor, I'm already starting to see that number rise and spike out of my ideal range because of the simplicity or how high glycemic those carbohydrates are at that point. Again, for those of you guys who are brand new to this, ignore the last like 60 seconds of what I talked about there. Okay? Now, as we move on to healthy fats, this is where we start talking about our dressings, our sauces and nut butters and all of that type of stuff, right? Nut butter like peanut butter and cashew butter, that type of thing, right? So when we look at those dressings and the fat, you can have an additional 1 to 2 servings of fat in your day. So the protein that you're eating, if you're getting dairy or using dairy rather as one of your sources of protein is at your snacks, all protein is generally going to have a degree of fat with it, right? It's just a macronutrient. We're not adding the fat, it already exists inside of it. So that's one area where we're like already taking the constraint for that macronutrient of fat, but also we tend to overconsume it. And this is how we prepare our food. If you go to make eggs or whatever in the morning and you throw in there like 2 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil, you should probably go back and make sure you journal that 2 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil because it's getting cooked into your food. If we're adding butter, if we're adding peanut butter is a great example of that, right? If we take a look at what peanut butter is, 1 serving is 2 tablespoons, which is like the tips of your thumbs here, right? That's it. And I don't know about you, but when I put peanut butter on a slice of bread, I'm putting like 4 tablespoons on each slice. And if I'm making a PB&J, I'm putting enough jelly in between those two, I don't choke on the sandwich as well with it. So instead of what I thought was like a somewhat healthy snack, is like a 700 calorie bomb of fat with only 20 grams of protein in it. So a little off on the ratio side of it. So again, in this case, I do want you making sure that you're journaling, but weighing your sauces, dressings, nut butters, different things like that. Butter, extra virgin olive oil, all that stuff fits into it. Avocado is an added fat as well too, and you need to make sure that you're weighing it. Generally speaking, when it comes to fats, you're going to look at the label, make sure that your scale is set to grams so that you can get the most accurate measurement of the amount of that dressing added fat that's in your diet. This is the trickiest area, right? Fat is one of the quickest and easiest areas for us to overconsume because there are more than twice the amount of calories per gram of fat than there are in carbs or protein. Carbs and protein have 4 calories per gram. Fat has 9 calories per gram. And it's generally more dense. It's not as fibrous, not as full or full of water, right? And therefore we can way overconsume that without feeling as full compared to carbs and protein. So just keep that in mind. And then snacks, right? My favorite subject on here. Snacks you take into a lot of these different ways, shapes, and forms. We talked about like the dairy side of things. I think like adding a whey protein with like a Skim Fairlife is a great way to get like those shakes in. We can look at like Quest bars, the Bear Bells, I think is the brand that we're talking about a little bit more often. But the thing that I want you to look at right there at the very top and in bold is that our snacks are less than 250 calories total. And for every 10 calories, there's at least 1 gram of protein. So if your snack has 220 calories in it, we want to have 22 grams of protein or more. Remember, protein is this thing that fills us up, right? Protein is the macronutrient that has the highest satiety effect, but it also has the highest thermic effect, which means that like for every 100 calories of protein that you eat, you're going to burn roughly 25 to 35 of those calories just digesting it as well too. And it's a big reason why we're stacking in that macronutrient on such a high level here. So there's more and more options in this world. Snacks are mostly meant to be like a convenient tide you over type of a thing. So again, keep it to 250 calories or less. Try to make these the ones that you're making the most convenient for yourself. All right, so we're going to go into like kind of stage 3 of this, part 3 of this here. We're going to talk about what to expect each of the weeks coming up, as well as some strategies. And then those of you guys that aren't doing the more complicated stuff, you can ignore the next 2 sections after that for this presentation here. But this next upcoming one, this part 3 is the last part for those of you guys who are brand new to this here. Stay tuned.